So that takes me to why I was able to not start vaping in the first place.
The country is set to ban recreational vaping as part of a major crackdown on what experts have called an epidemic.
So I wanted to record this video about why I never started vaping. Vaping has become such an epidemic, so many people are vaping. It just seems so prevalent. It's interesting to understand why. So for context, I'm 30 years old. Vaping became very prevalent maybe 5 years ago. And basically everyone I know vapes. It's really hard to find a social situation where people aren't vaping. There are all sorts of changes in the law now, like in Australia, it's illegal. So importing vapes is illegal. It's illegal to sell them. You need a prescription to be able to get one, but somehow they all slip through the cracks and people have them. So I'm going to talk about how I managed to avoid falling into the trap of vaping. So going back a little bit, when I was young, there was so much awareness around quitting smoking. And I grew up with all of the ad campaigns that were so intense.
Even if you only smoke low-tar cigarettes, chances are you have emphysema in its early stages. Just about every smoker does.
And that was just so ingrained and pressed into my memory as a child that I always had this kind of awareness around not smoking, it being bad for you, nicotine being addictive. And I think at the time, this was the early 2000s, rates of smoking were decreasing, but it was still quite prevalent. A lot of people did still smoke. And it was really this transition socially where people were transitioning away from smoking and going through the journey and process of trying to quit. And a significant amount of people still smoked, but a lot of people were stopping. And it was becoming more socially taboo, you couldn't smoke inside bars anymore or in public spaces. And slowly over time, the spaces where you can smoke have reduced, and now there's designated spaces where you can smoke, and they're kind of few and far between now. I have a feeling that maybe because the prevalence of smoking now is so much lower and adults don't smoke as much, there isn't as much campaigning around the risks of smoking. So perhaps younger people haven't had the same kind of image pressed in their memory about the risks. I actually, despite all of that awareness, all of that education, being very anti-smoking, actually started smoking and decided to smoke when I was 16, which was kind of weird because at the same time, I was very against smoking. So I had this cognitive dissonance of really enjoying it and the idea of it and the experience of smoking, but also while doing it, feeling like I was killing myself and being very aware of the risks and that kind of creating this anxiety. But notwithstanding that, I still decided to smoke, and I wanted to smoke because I enjoyed it. And I kind of had this idea in my mind that I could rationalize smoking while I was young because I could do it for a short period of time, a few years. And, if I quit early on, then, the risks of me developing smoking-related disease would be reduced anyway, and I'd end up with the same likelihood of developing those diseases as someone who had never smoked. I just felt like I could get away with it, which I did. So I smoked for maybe 8 years, and I quit in probably early to mid-20s. I tried to quit a couple of times, but I properly quit in my mid-20s. And I went through multiple processes of quitting. So I really learnt how difficult it was to quit nicotine. And despite the fact that I wanted to quit and I kind of had thought smoking was gross and it was impacting my ability to train and do exercise and, build the body that I wanted, it was still really hard to quit. And it's quite insidious. Nicotine is this strange substance where you don't really notice the effects of it. It's quite subtle. It's not like when you take illicit substances and you immediately or soon after really feel the effects. You're very energized. It gives you a return on investment. Nicotine is more subtle. It's hard to really explain why it's addictive, but it is. It gets you hooked. And I think also having the mentality and being told that it's addictive, you believe that it's addictive, and you believe that it's hard to quit smoking. You've got this kind of awareness of smoking being almost impossible to quit. With all of that in mind, persevered and managed to quit smoking. And I went through multiple attempts and, I would relapse and go back to smoking. And smoke while drinking or socially. But ultimately, I did manage to quit, and it probably would have been 7 or 8 years after I had started. So by the time I was maybe 24, 25, I had properly quit smoking. So that takes me to why I was able to not start vaping in the first place. By the time that I had quit, I had really built up the skills and capability to deal with nicotine addiction. It had taken me multiple attempts. I had built lots of strategies. I had worked really hard. And then I'd gotten to the point where I had been able to quit and move on. And once you do that and you embed that behavior for an extended period of time, you develop like a capability and skills. So when vaping became more mainstream, I was a little bit skeptical about it because I was like, what is this? There's no way that this is healthy. I never believed that that was good for you or not unhealthy. I always thought in any event, it might be better than smoking, but it can't be good for you. I never fell into that trap of believing that vaping was harmless. And I think that's the key issue, is that people genuinely believe that vaping is harmless and therefore are open to trying it. And then once you start doing it, the amount of nicotine in vapes is so high. You're just ingesting it so rapidly that it's giving you this like nicotine overload. And I've noticed that when I have tried vapes, the energy that I get from it is so intense because it's such a significant amount of nicotine. When I first got exposed to vaping, I really already had the skills and foundation to not want to get addicted to it. And I think it did put me in a good position to resist the temptation and the kind of social pull of vaping. I have had a few periods where I have vaped, and I would say that I kind of got hooked on it for a couple of weeks at a few different times. And every time I found it was really difficult to stop. And thankfully, I kind of had the muscle memory of knowing that I had quit smoking before. I could give up nicotine. It was possible to build new habits and behaviors. And it just takes willpower and consistency and a strong mindset, and you just have to get through it. And so thankfully I had those skills. And so when I did start vaping and kind of get semi-hooked, it was quite not easy, but it was possible for me to stop. But what I'm noticing is that a lot of people don't. Like, the prevalence of vaping is still so high. Most people that I know socially vape. Anywhere you go, see a lot of people vaping. And I think it's really problematic because, particularly for younger people, not the same kind of campaigns and awareness around smoking and the harms of smoking. And so I think that, this generation has like fallen into this cohort where they didn't grow up with smoking being prevalent and being educated about the risks of smoking, and were exposed to this new social norm of vaping with a false belief that it was harmless, and incidentally become so addicted to nicotine. And what we're now learning with research and studying into vaping is that it is bad for you. There are chemicals that you're inhaling, and you don't really know the quality of the product. A lot of the time, they are being illegally imported into wherever you're buying them from. And it's difficult to trace the supply chain and to have confidence that it's well regulated and that it's been produced safely, and that, you're not being exposed to other chemicals or more chemicals than what you would be if you were using a well-made and regulated product. And I know people joke about, battery acid and things like that, but yeah, like, who knows? Like, I don't know what's coming out of this little plastic thing. In addition to kind of the health risks, which we don't know what they are or how they're going to pan out, vaping is so problematic for the environment. Like, literally, you're just producing these disposable plastic things that don't break down, that have lithium batteries inside them, and that they're not recyclable. You can't reuse them. Once you're done with it after a few days or a week, that's it. And you just have to keep buying them and producing them and creating all of this toxic waste that is just going into landfill and harming the environment. And on top of that, you're harming yourself and your own health. I think vaping is such an epidemic and is not being dealt with very effectively. In Australia, for example, they've taken measures to outlaw vaping. So you cannot legally sell vapes, but they're still being illegally imported. People are still using them. It's really difficult to regulate that. There's been situations where garbage is being collected and there are vapes that are in people's bins that are being compressed in the garbage truck, exploding and starting fires. Or they're catching on fire on planes. My advice to anyone that is vaping or is addicted to it would be that it is possible to stop. Nicotine is very addictive, and it's important to be aware of that. And the first few days and the first week where you are giving it up and going through withdrawal, that's a period of your brain rewiring itself and developing new neural pathways to exist without the substance of nicotine. It's really hard, and it causes emotions and stress and fatigue and all sorts of dysregulation, but it is temporary and you do move on from it.
It's proven that vapes cause real harm. Every vape is a hit to your health. For more proof, search vaping harms.